Syracuse football had the week off, but we sure didn't. It's the Orange is the New Fast podcast, and we're here to talk about all things SU. I'm Cole Weinstein, and I'm joined by Thomas Schultz.
What's going on, Cole?
And Chris Lauk.
What's going on, guys?
And there was no game Saturday, but we figured we would take the time this week to make this sort of our mid-season report, mid-season recap on how Syracuse football has been so far this season and where we think they're going next. So I guess the question I want to ask you guys is, what were your expectations going into the year, and where do you feel like you're at now?
Look, I didn't think this was a team that might start the year 4-2. I thought that Western Michigan game could have been a game similar to Middle Tennessee State last year. Again, you have to go to Kalamazoo, first game of the year. You're not in the dome like you would expect to start the year. And then who would have seen Florida State being this bad? I thought that was an L right off the gate. So honestly, I could have seen us at this point at 3-3. I didn't think we'd lose to Pitt. Potentially 2-4. I mean, Pitt does play us tough, but still, I thought that'd be a win. Clemson, I thought we would have gotten blown out there. That didn't happen. So, yes, it's been a rough couple of weeks, but still, we're off to a good start.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I thought my worry was I thought Syracuse was supposed to lose a game that they weren't supposed to, and not win a game that they weren't supposed to, or that they were supposed to. So I guess like the Pitt loss sort of makes sense in the scheme of how Syracuse football has been in the past, but I expected like an FSU loss, a UConn loss, maybe a Western Michigan loss. But so far overall, Syracuse has played pretty well, and every game has either been a win or a close loss.
I think also we can look at this season as this team arguably should be 6-0. That game against Clemson, it was a moral victory, but we both know, all of us know, Dino Babers really wanted that win. And that game against Pitt should have been an easy win for us. We were up by 2 scores early before Pitt really even had the ball. We had an interception early, and Dungy marched down the field and an early touchdown. But this team could very easily be 6-0. If you told me that at the beginning of the year, I would have thought you were crazy. Like, before the Pitt loss, I thought this team had a very good shot of going potentially 10-2 after the Clemson loss. If you told me even that, I would have thought you were even crazier. But realistically, I'm thinking this team is going to go 7-5, 8-4 if we can pull off one of the bigger wins against Notre Dame or BC.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think overall, Syracuse fans should come in feeling pretty satisfied, even though the Pitt loss is still, I think, fresh for all of us, and it still hurts a little bit. And it's a win that they should have had. And 5-1 just feels so much sweeter than 4-2. But I think if you would ask any of us if we would have taken 4-2 at the start of the season, I think everyone would have at this point. And the schedule is manageable throughout the rest of the way. So I really am excited with how Syracuse football has started, and I was impressed with, especially when they were getting on a roll, how they were staying in games that they weren't supposed to, which I guess was really only the Clemson game, and really like separating from teams like Western Michigan, Florida State, which still has talent, and UConn, and really separated and didn't play them close like I think older teams might have in the past.
And a big impact is it's got to be the experience. I mean, look, the offense is much more experienced. The defensive line, really the defense is very interesting because the defensive line, very experienced. Linebackers, a lot of inexperience, a lot of inconsistent play there. And then the secondary, inexperienced group, but they've been playing very well. But the special teams is where I want to start off today. Look, we didn't really know much about Andre Schmidt coming into this year. He was a walk-on. He was a redshirt. You know, we kind of thought it might be a down year. I had a senior last year in Adams, and he was great. But you think maybe the kicker game isn't as strong. Andre Schmidt might be the best kicker in the country right now.
Here's what amazes me. He's hit 3 for 3 from 50+, and his longest is 54. We're talking like NFL kicks for a freshman in college. This guy's, I think he's a redshirt freshman, so he's 19, but still, he's kicking NFL field goals in college. And also another big accomplishment for him. He's 30 for 30 for extra points. A lot of these college games we see these college kickers kind of miss the extra point, and it costs them down the run. So for Andre Schmidt to be hitting all these extra points is key for Dino Babers in this offense.
Absolutely, and Schmidt, a midseason All-American, which very well deserved. Like you said, Thomas, he might be the best kicker in the country, and he's looking great. But Syracuse, I feel like, has always had really, really good special teams. I'm blanking on the name of Syracuse's kicker last year, but he was a awards finalist for Best Kicker of the Year. So Syracuse has definitely had kicking talent in the past, and they've had Cole Murphy, who was previously the 4-year starter. He was known, I think, by a lot of people for that miss against Florida State that really gave them a loss that they should have won that game. But Murphy was a finalist, I believe it's the Lou Groza Award, and Andre Schmidt, same thing, sort of following in his footsteps. Syracuse has always had really good special teams from the kicking game, and I think maybe more known for their punters, Riley Dixon in the NFL, that I think is a favorite for a lot of Syracuse fans, but Syracuse had really good special teams, and Schmidt just falls into that.
Aside from the kicker, obviously he's one of the best in the country, but I make this comparison all the time. I think Jamal Custis is also very effective on special teams. You look at these games, he's always for punts or kickoffs. He's always one of the first guys down the other side of the field. And we saw the game against Clemson. He kind of forced, I believe it was Rogers, to drop that ball. It kind of led for Syracuse to get another couple of points on the field goal, which is also key because it kind of keeps the momentum going for Syracuse. I always made a comparison to Matthew Slater of the Patriots, first guy down there on the other side of the field for a kickoff or a punt return. And I always see that with Jamal Custis. If you can keep doing that, forcing pressure on these kick returners, then that can be very key for this Syracuse offense, or keeping the defense off the field as well in the second half.
I've never seen a guy get down the field as fast as Jamal Custis gets down there. It seems like he takes 3 steps and boom, he's covered 40 yards. So, yeah, it's very impressive, Chris, as you mentioned. And, I mean, it's not just him. Like you said, the Clemson game, Amari Rogers had a terrible game. And Amari Rogers is a guy who the whole season has been a great strength for the Tigers. He was terrible. He had 2 drop punts, and he bobbled a third, so he had a rough game. And then it's not just Jamal Custis. It's not just the kicking game. It's also the punting game. Sterling Hoffrichter has had a quiet but very good year himself. He's been named to some watch lists. He was named preseason All-ACC, so a little bit more hype coming around him coming into the season. But look, this special teams, the offensive is good. The special teams might be better.
I feel like for a punter, if your name's not mentioned, you're doing a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Chris. I mean, look, this is a team, like you mentioned, if you're kicking 50-yard field goals, you're doing something right in college. I mean, programs like Alabama and Georgia, we've seen in the playoffs every year, their kicking game is their weakness. And for Syracuse to have that strength already, that could give you some games that you might not be in or that you might have lost previously.
I mean, we talked about before, like, one kick, one extra point could make a difference, especially that Florida State game last year. A lot of Syracuse fans kind of remember.
Absolutely, and both of the guys are definitely getting respect. I saw on Q's Football, their Instagram page, both Schmidt and their punter are both getting some mid-season accolade, which is very well deserved. Syracuse special teams really been solid, and definitely special teams is just as important as the other 2 sides of the football. So it's definitely an important part of the game, and Syracuse's success in it definitely helps give them wins.
Well, I think that's probably one of the strongest parts of this team, but another strong part, more or less, has been the offense. We've seen Jamal Custis kind of step up more or less this year. But what's interesting about this team, we've seen the run game hurt them time and time again for the defensive side. It's kind of interesting because aside from Eric Dungy, this Syracuse team does not really have a running game. We have 2 to 3 running backs who can be that kind of number 1 guy, but no one's really been able to prove themselves yet. It's been a running back by committee, and this running game, aside from Dungy, really has been existent.
Yeah, no, I mean, the thing is, like, the running game, I think, has improved a lot this year. Obviously, Dungy's going to have an impact there, and a lot of times he might be your leading rusher, but a lot of that is because he's getting a lot more rushes, whether drawn up in the game plan or not. He's running the ball a lot more than your Dante Strickland, Jarvian Howards, and Mo Neals. But I don't think Syracuse has a running back 1. They've just got 3 running back 2s. And look, we thought Chris Elmore going into the season, going to be your third down and short back, going to be your goal line back. Jarvian Howard has stepped into that role, and he has been absolutely fantastic. He's not a 300-pound back like Chris Elmore is, but this is a guy who at 210 brings power, and just the speed and electricity he brings on the field is kind of what we looked for from Dante Strickland, and we haven't gotten. And he's been very impressive so far this season.
I think overall what I've really liked about Syracuse's running game, a very limited running game for sure, but a running game nonetheless that's improved from last year, is that it's a good complement. Overall, just the running back overall feels like a change of pace from the prolific passing game that Dino Babers offenses are known for, and that Eric Dungy and Tommy DeVito, when he's come in, have showed, is that the running game can just be competent and can sort of be change of pace and keep the defense on their toes and can maybe break off for a big run, but mostly is just what keeps Syracuse's offense two-dimensional versus one-dimensional. And I think overall, for Syracuse to be the type of team that Syracuse is, the hope is that Syracuse is going to be this year, which is a 7, maybe 8-win team, the running game is good enough.
Well, I think you guys are sleeping on the running game a little bit here because this is a team who's only had one game with less than 200 yards on the ground. That was against Clemson. Easily the best D-line in the country, maybe the best D-line of this decade. They're fantastic. They've got 4 guys who are going to be first-round picks. And look, you've got the other thing that this running game does, not only does it bring a change of pace, Cole, like you mentioned, it also gives the defense more of a rest. I've said in the past, I'm not a huge fan of the up-tempo offense because late in the games, we saw it against Pitt, you lose the lead, you're too tired, and if you're in tough, close games and they go into overtime, you just don't have the steam that the other team has. So having a running game that can kind of chew up some clock as you go instead of having these 2-minute drives, that's a big deal.
Well, I don't think we're hating on this running game. I think it's more so the running backs. One real running back hasn't been able to step up. I mean, you can say Dungy has been the leading rusher of this team. You don't really see that a lot for a quarterback. You see a lot. Syracuse doesn't have that number one punch guy like A.J. Dillon for BC. We're going to see in a couple of weeks. In order for this team to really mix it up, I think a top running back could really make this offense kind of shake up a little bit, kind of be that spark this team needs.
One thing I will say about the running game is that the 3 backs we've talked about, Mo Neal, Dante Strickland, and Jarvian Howard, they all are averaging over 4 yards a carry, and Howard's actually averaging 6.6 yards a carry, which those are really impressive numbers, but it's pretty evenly distributed with Mo Neal has the most carries on the team, I would even say by far. So I guess if you were to call a number one back, he's the number one back. But there is no number one bell cow. These guys are all sort of change of pace backs who are shifty and can break off a bigger run. But Syracuse's running game is still a clear number 2 to the passing game. And when the running game is number 1, that's because Eric Dungy's running.
I'm a big Jarvian Howard fan. I think, look, for him to be doing what he's doing as a true freshman in a foreign offense is very impressive. And I think not this year, but the next few years, he's going to be a star at Syracuse. And we mentioned, Mo Neal, he's your shifty, elusive back. Jarvian Howard is a better power back and a better just kind of bruiser, your bell cow back over Dante Strickland. Dante Strickland, obviously, he's a senior, he's more experienced. He's just been here longer. He knows what he's doing, and Jarvian Howard's still picking up some things. But, look, I think the running game has really picked up the pieces for the wide receivers. We've talked about, similar to the running game, there's kind of 3 wide receiver 2s. There's not a guy like last year, your Steve Ishmaels, your Irv Phillips. We thought it might be Jamal Custis, but he's been very streaky this year. The running backs have kind of picked it up and taken control when needed. Obviously, they're not this phenomenal force that that you're going to just grind down opponents with, but their increased play and their increased performance has allowed the receivers to not be as good as they were last year.
You talked about Custis being streaky. The first couple of weeks, he looked like he was be like a freak of nature, number 1 back, maybe in the country, just like Ishmael was. But late, when Dungy throws that deep ball, he hasn't been able to catch it. We saw the last game against Pitt, he got away with one. He stepped out of bounds, but they let it slide because of the quick play. But yeah, you're right. Custis has not been that deep ball threat we were hoping he would be. So in response, there's been a lot of short passes, short slot passes, where I think Taj Harris has really stepped up for his team. He's only had 10 receptions, but he's averaging over 10 yards per reception, which is very good for someone that young in this program.
Yeah, for sure. I think this has been an interesting year because Syracuse, last year, complete opposite of the running game, had 2 number 1 wide receivers. And this year, there's you're still looking for the number 1 guy, and each guy can sort of do something different. So that's interesting. Like Jamal Custis is very much more of the possession receiver. He's the big body that can go up for passes. Sean Riley is the athletic gadget guy. Sean Riley also has done a little bit in the run game. He's more of a gadget player. Taj Harris has stepped up. Nakeem Johnson's done some good work. Everyone has their own thing that they can do. Every receiver can do something well, but there's no number 1 guy who is Dungy's guy. who he's going to throw to him. Defenses have to game plan specifically for him and try and shut him down. Syracuse just has a lot of different, interesting receivers who would all make good number 2s or number 3s. But no guy who's stepping up and being, this is the lead guy.
Look, like I said, the running game has made a big impact here, but yeah, Syracuse has taken a step back in the receivers this year. They don't have those, great threats in Steve Ishmael and Irv Phillips, but they've got a very balanced offense this year, which I think is better than what you had last year, where the running game is just very kind of detrimental to your offense, and the passing game is what's keeping you in games. This year, much more balanced, and even between the receivers has been more balanced. I mean, your leading receiver, with the most receptions, Sean Riley has 26. Jamal Custis has 25. You have 12 guys who have caught a pass this year, which is something you couldn't say last year. So, yeah, you might not have your stars of last year and the year before, but the balance of this team has really allowed it to be even a better offense than it was the year before.
I feel like the past 2 games, Clemson and Pitt, we keep saying, well, Dungy didn't play his best game. Dungy could have been better. Dungy could have been that spark this offense needed. But I think one of the reasons he's struggling in the passing game more specifically is because he doesn't have his big tight end, Ravian Pierce. Ravian Pierce has been out since week 3, I believe, with an injury. We've seen in the NFL, these quarterbacks look for the big tight ends like Rob Gronkowski, Travis Kelce. They get themselves out of tight pocket situations. And unfortunately, Dungy doesn't have that big body to go to when someone like Jamal Custis is covered. We keep talking about the lack of another receiver. Usually it's just one receiver has one big game. You need someone else there as well.
Well, I've said in the past, I'm a really big Ravian Pierce fan. I like just him as a player, and I think he's got really good physical ability as a tight end and can be a really, really interesting and talented receiving threat, especially in the end zone. That's what he was. He had a bit of a quiet week 1. He's only had 5 receptions on the year, but weeks 2 and 3, he had a touchdown catch in each of them. He was a really good guy to convert in the red zone, and that's needed for Syracuse. And Dungy, every quarterback needs a guy who's just going to be reliable in the red zone, and that's where I think he really shines. Is he's just a big body who can come up with catches, and he's hard to guard when you're on the 5 or you're on the 10 and you're just trying to get it in. And I definitely think that he adds a new dimension to Syracuse's offense, and hopefully he can come back soon.
Well, I want to touch on a position group that we usually forget. I want to talk about the big uglies, up front, that offensive line, which has been very good this year and obviously has led to an improved run game, has allowed Dungy a lot of time in the pocket, allowing him to extend plays and get the ball to receivers, and a lot of different receivers, really causing the ball to be the defense doesn't know where the ball is going, which is something that we couldn't say in the years past. But look, Dungy hasn't really had an injury scare this year, something we haven't been able to see at his tenure in Syracuse. A lot of that credit is due to that offensive line. They've kept him a clean pocket every single game except maybe Clemson, and really, I mean, nobody's going to have a clean pocket against Clemson. But you have guys like Dakota Martin. I mean, you don't have, besides your center, they're all upperclassmen on that offensive line. So you've got a lot of experience there, and it's really paid off in the run and the pass game.
Well, you talked a lot about Eric Dungy not having injury trouble this year. He had that one elbow injury earlier, but Tommy DeVito was able to pick up the team afterwards and beat FSU in that game. But I think the O-line not giving up a lot of sacks to Eric Dungy is key. We've seen in back-to-back years where the team's gone 4-8. The first half of the season when Dungy's healthy, they're playing good. These 4-2, 3-3 starts. But now, the second half of the season when Eric Dungy gets a lot of sacks, he gets beaten up, gets some concussion here or there, gets an injury there. This team starts to fall off in the second half because without Eric Dungy, they're not really the same Syracuse offense you'd expect. However, since that Florida State game, Tommy DeVito has proven himself to be that number 2 quarterback that in case Eric Dungy does get hurt, Syracuse relies on some number 2 guy. Last year, it was between Rex Culpepper. We saw a little bit of DeVito, but now we have a solidified number 2 quarterback in case Dungy does get hurt.
No, absolutely. I agree, but I still think this offense runs through Eric Dungy, and it's been nice to see that overall he's stayed relatively healthy and has been at least a little bit safer this year. Obviously, he's Dungy. He's going to be reckless. He's going to go and make plays and make playmaking first, which he has always done and has done this year. But I agree. As long as he is at quarterback, this offense works, and Dino Babers' scheme works with him at the helm.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dungy has been sacked 7 times this year. He was sacked once against Clemson, and as we mentioned, best defensive line in the country by far. It's not even close. So this offensive line, while we don't talk a lot about him, has made a huge impact. And look, Dino Babers said going into the season, the strength of this team is the offensive and defensive lines. And so far, he's been right.
Which a good football team should be strong in the trenches because that's where the games are won. And it's nice to see on both sides of the ball in the trenches, these guys keep just being in the college system and keep working and growing in the college system and beefing up and being on the weight training and the regimens that these guys are being put on. And when you just spend more time, especially as a lineman, when it's so technical, you're just going to continue to get better because the game's just going to slow down for you.
And look, this is a team, this is an offensive line that finally has the weight that you want from an ACC and a Power 5 school. Look, years past, they've been outplayed because they've just been smaller than the teams they're playing. This year, every single one of their offensive linemen is 300 pounds plus. And that's what we see in programs like Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. That's what you need to win in big-time Power 5 football.
They have big guys.
We're also hoping that these experienced guys, all except the center or juniors and seniors, hoping they can pass something down to these younger guys, younger recruits down the road, so that when these people graduate, the legacy isn't forgetting of a great O-line.
But Cervais is still a redshirt sophomore, so
Correct.
He's had time in the program at center. He's still getting better and working in Dino's offense. So it's still very much, this is a very experienced unit, which for the offensive line, time together and experience is vital.
Chris, you mentioned that, you're hoping that these guys can pass something down. In Dino Babers' first couple recruiting classes, his offensive line was kind of weak, wasn't a great class. Last year, one of the best players in the class, Kadir White, on the offensive line, and he's going to have a chance to grow. We thought, you know what, this offensive line hasn't been very good. He might have to step into play immediately. So far, not the case, and that's what you love to see. You don't want to throw a true freshman into the fire off the bat.
We've seen that in the past. Never really worked out very well for that team. But yeah, definitely we're hoping this O-line can continue going into the second half, protecting Dungy so this offense can still thrive off of the passing game and off of Dungy's running game if need be.
Yeah, but speaking, we talked a lot about the offense. Obviously, they've been great. That defense has been special too. Outside of the linebackers, what do you guys think of this linebacker group?
Well, I think first and foremost, Andre Sisco has been an absolute revelation. He's a second-team All-American. I think either leading college football in interceptions or close to it. He's been really great this year, helping to force turnovers and interceptions especially, which Syracuse did not do very well last year.
For the linebackers, they're inexperienced. They keep saying this week after week after week, giving up big plays on the run to ETN, to Pitt as well. We've been seeing these teams with good running games kind of break through the stronger D-line, and once you get past that D-line, the secondary is already halfway down the field covering receivers, so it's up to those linebackers who aren't really experienced enough to understand they're the last line of defense, aside from the secondary, who's already, like I said, halfway down the field. But these linebackers, I think this game coming up against UNC, they have a pretty good running back, but not as good as we've seen in the past with ETN and against Pitt. So I think this is a good game for them to come in, prove that they can still, they have a right to be on this team, and they can still kind of progress as the season goes on.
Look, as we know, when a team's running, it's the D-line's job to kind of occupy blocks, don't let any offensive lineman get downfield, and then the linebackers have to attack and get to the hole and find the running back, clog the hole, stop the run, contain the run. So far, haven't been able to do that. You know, a lot of that's due to the inexperience, like you mentioned, Chris. You're losing your top 2 linebackers from last year, Zaire Franklin and Paris Bennett. They're both in the pros. So a lot of growth that still needs to happen on this group.
And we keep saying the running game hurts us. That's not good when you're going up to a top-tier running back like A.J. Dillon in BC the last week of the game, or last week of the season. We're going to have to figure out which linebackers stay, which ones go, by the time that game comes up.
But Cole, as you mentioned, this secondary has been a major surprise. We really had a lot of questions going into the season. We didn't know how good you're going to be. Look, when you're playing a true freshman at safety, you're a little worried. But Andre Sisco, like you said, he's been fantastic. He could be freshman All-American. He's already got 4 picks. He started off the season very hot. He's cooled down a little bit, but this is a guy who is, he's like I said, he's a true freshman. He still has a lot of growth, and he's really going to be possibly a star for the next 2 to 3 years for the Syracuse Orange. But guys like Scoop Bradshaw, there still needs to be growth along that Syracuse secondary. You know, Bradshaw and others still make a lot of mental mistakes, but clear growth and a lot better than we thought they'd be.
Yeah, Cisco 4 interceptions in 6 games. That's tied for the most in the ACC with 4. BC defensive back is also tied with him. And then another group that I really want to talk about is the defensive line and pass rush specifically. Kendall Coleman and Alton Robinson both have 6 sacks in 6 games, and they're both tied for 3rd most sacks in the ACC, which is really big because it's noticeable the pass rush that Syracuse is getting. And it makes a difference on quarterbacks, and just overall, it's a more disruptive defense, which allows the secondary to make more plays when your quarterback's under duress.
Cole, you mentioned Coleman and Robinson have 6 sacks each. That's 12 for the year for both of them combined. Last year, Syracuse only had 17. So the fact that 2 guys alone almost have as many as this entire team had last year, that's a big statement for these 2 players.
Absolutely.
They're stepping up, they're making plays, and they're making sure this defense has something to work with.
Yeah, and I mean, look, when you have the pressure coming off the edge on both sides, you're forcing the quarterback up into the pocket, giving your defensive tackles more opportunities, giving your linebackers more opportunities. And while the linebackers have made a lot of mistakes in the run game, they have capitalized so far this year as all 4 of Syracuse's linebackers have sacks, at least 1.
Yeah, and Coleman and Robinson, again, both juniors, so really guys who have grown in college football and have grown in the weight rooms and have grown in the training regiments and just understand the game better, because ultimately when you're not getting 5-star guys, that's how you have a successful program. Is you have guys that grow within the program and bulk up and just get better overall as players.
And like you mentioned, Cole, I mean, yeah, they bulk up, but guess what? These guys, they're not 300 pounds, but those defensive tackles are. So, yeah, a lot of experience on both of these lines, and it's finally paying off because just like the offensive line, last year, this group was getting outplayed and run over consistently. This year, whole different story.
Well, guys, looking at the schedule, there's only 2 away games left. The majority of these games are home. We have 4 home games, 2 away games. I think for that alone, coming back to the Loud House for 4 out of those 2 games is going to be crucial. Excuse me, 1 game is in New York Yankee Stadium. So 3 more games in the Loud House. There's no reason this team should not be able to make a bowl game with already 4 wins.
Absolutely. I think there's always the worry in that Syracuse and Dino Babers teams don't know how to close out a season. Last year,
usually because Dungy's injured.
Well, Syracuse won 4 games, then didn't win 1 for the rest of the year and looked pretty primed to make a bowl game. Again, though, 4-2. You have 6 games left. You need to win at least 2 of those to get a bowl game. At this point, I'm think that the minimum expectation should be a 7-win season, but it definitely looks winnable. UNC is a very winnable game. NC State at home, you have a possibility. Syracuse has always been, under Babers, has been a team that's beaten a ranked team they shouldn't beat. It was Virginia Tech 2 years ago, Clemson the year before, and then almost Clemson this year, but NC State could be that team. Wake Forest, again, winnable. Louisville is a winnable game. Notre Dame is going to be tough, but we'll see how Syracuse plays. And BC, again, going to be tough. But I'm looking at the UNCs, the Wake Forest, the Louisvilles. Like, those games very much seem like super winnable games, and all of them at home, which is huge.
Yeah, I think Syracuse should try to win 3 to 4 of these. Look, NC State, that's a winnable game, but that is a very, very tough game to win. NC State this year, they're undefeated. They're one of 8 teams remaining that's undefeated. They haven't had a very tough schedule, but they've got a very experienced quarterback in Finley. He's a redshirt senior, I believe, so their offense is potent. They lost some defensive guys. Bradley Chubb, of course, 5th overall pick last year. Their D-line isn't the same, but still a very good team and possibly improved. Dave Doran, the head coach at NC State's done a lot with that team. But then I want to talk about Louisville. You get that game in the Carrier Dome. In the past, we've seen, hey, Louisville, very dynamic program. Bobby Petrino knows what he's doing. Obviously, they don't have Lamar Jackson. But what's overlooked, we always look at Lamar Jackson leaving. That defense is completely new. Their whole secondary is new. Jair Alexander, a first-round pick to the Packers. He was the leader. I mean, there's no
Lamar.
Yeah, there's no upperclassmen on that secondary for Louisville. And look, their linebackers and defensive line, they're all underclassmen too. So, yeah, you get to play them late in the year, which kind of gives them more time to become experienced. But this is still a very young Louisville team, which an experienced offensive line and experienced quarterback could exploit.
Absolutely, I think overall, like, if Syracuse won against UNC, they beat Wake Forest, they beat Louisville, and they beat BC. I think we all be very happy with them finishing the year with 8 wins, and they don't have to beat a ranked team this year. Even just getting to 7 wins and beating UNC and Louisville and Wake Forest, I think we'd be happy as well. So Syracuse doesn't have to beat teams that are far better than them to end up with a really impressive season, because so far they've won, with the exception of the Pitt game, the games that they should have won. So I think just my hope overall is that Syracuse keeps winning the games that they should win. Dungy seems healthy as of right now. Had a week off. Beating UNC really, I think, will set the tempo. Bring Syracuse to 5 wins, which has never happened in the Dino Babers era, and really just get them past that hump to continue to keep pushing and maybe make a run.
Well, I think after week 5, after that Clemson game, when this team was ranked 28th for the most votes, we were thinking, oh, this team could be the top 25 after this Pitt game. Maybe if we beat Pitt, it'll take another one against UNC to be ranked. Unfortunately, I think our hopes of being ranked are out of the question unless you beat NC State and Notre Dame, both of them. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be possible, but we've seen this team put up a very good fight against Clemson, who was number 3 at the time, and is 3 now. We've seen them beat a Florida State team who we said is not as good, but still a high-day program. So I think, unfortunately, unless they win out the rest of the season, they're not going to be ranked, but definitely they should be very happy with the bowl game after going 4-8 in the past 3 years.
Chris, I'll take it a step further. I think if they lose to UNC, they're not going to make a bowl game, and here's why. I think UNC, that's a winnable game. You're coming out of a bye. You're at home. This is a bad UNC team. The Pitt loss concerns me. I think that's a game that a team like this, an experienced veteran group, they've been in this position before, that's a game they need to win. I don't want to see in years past where Syracuse drops games against teams like Wake Forest last year at home. Those are losses that you should not have. I don't care if Dungy's healthy or not, especially since he's healthy. You cannot lose your game after a bye at home against the UNC. That's just not going to cut it. So this game is going to be a big deal for Syracuse because, look, UNC's strength is their run game, and that's Syracuse's weakness. So you have to come and you have to be prepared, and you've got to be prepared to stop the run. Because if you can stop the run, your ball hawks and Andre Cisco, they're gonna be able to get some picks, cause some turnovers, and guess what? You got those 2 big defensive ends in Kendall Coleman and Ollie Robinson who are gonna make their impact known as well.
Very, very important game this Saturday, and we'll be around to cover it all next week. I think overall this has been a pretty good recap. I really enjoyed, just for my own self, looking back at Syracuse through the first half of the season and really seeing what they've done well, what they can improve on, and I think overall agreeing that they've surpassed expectations, and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing that Syracuse is 4-2 right now. 4-1 previously, it was their best record in 8 years. They hadn't been 4-0 since, I believe, 91. Syracuse is doing really good stuff, and this team just feels different. So hopefully they can get a really strong win against a winnable UNC team, and we'll be there to talk about it. But until then, hope you've enjoyed the podcast, the Orange is the New Faster podcast, and hope you have yourself a good night.